Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with the chess world's best players, promoters, and educators about their lives, careers, current projects, and best practices. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. What's up, everyone? We are finally back here on Perpetual Chess, and my guest this week is international master and YouTube streamer and chess instructor, young Israeli IM Asaf Givon. Asaf, thank you for joining us.
Yes, Ben, thank you too. It's actually a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so you're an up-and-coming YouTuber. We had some fans of yours reach out and suggest that you would be a good guest, and I know that you're a highly reviewed coach on Lichess. So we'll get to all that stuff, but Asaf, I got to talk about the candidates a little bit. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 21st, and I believe we're actually going to come out with this tomorrow. So I don't want to go too deep on this tournament because I think not everyone listens to this podcast the day it comes out, and there'll be plenty of time to analyze that everything that's happened. But I was just curious, like, what you've had a chance to check out from it in terms of the games or the storylines and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, I think in general, that's something I've already said kind of to a couple of people who ask me. I, in general, am very excited each year when the candidates, every 2 years, so when the candidates start, because I always consider the candidates to be an even more interesting tournament than the actual World Championship match, because this tournament's kind of... The players just has to win many games in order to qualify, so they're taking much more risks. They kind of they play at their peak, kind of. That's the way I see it. So yeah, I definitely seeing the games and catching up with the commentary and the game analysis and press conferences. Yes.
Yeah, it's so much fun to watch. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording our interview. One person in particular who's made some headlines in terms of really pushing for the win is legendary former world champion Vladimir Kramnik. And we were discussing, so he's been pushing really hard to win his games, which, like you say, makes sense in a sort of winner-take-all format. But it seems like he's even pushing to win the post-mortem in terms of when they go over the games afterward. And I've seen a lot of discussion online about that. And you were saying that as a longtime fan of his, this was not unusual. So for those who may not have watched Mr. Kramnik's press conferences as much, could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So basically, I kind of watched many kind of press conferences that Vladimir Kramnik did over the years. I think he's a great chess player, and watching his commentary and game analysis after the game is really enlightening to kind of see a player in this caliber, his ideas, his analysis. And I always notice that he has this tendency to maybe overestimate or just being very optimistic about the evaluation of his own position, which is, I think, understandable. I think many players maybe in this on these levels, they are so strong that they always feel like, maybe not all of them, but many of them feel like their position is always better or their understanding is better than the opponents. And basically Kramnik is doing just this in the candidates. And to me, it's not such a big surprise because I've seen it quite a lot. But I guess for many people, because maybe this is the first time they get to see those press conferences, so it's kind of coming by surprise for them. But I can really understand where this is coming from.
Okay, yeah. So a little bit of more background for people who are expressing shock, and I haven't gotten to watch that many of his press conferences, so it's something I'd like to check out and get a little more context on myself. But it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of chess players at the lower levels are very prone to overestimating their position, myself included. But it's interesting that even at the elite level, where so many of your games end in draws, and it's important for the competitive. It's important competitively to be able to objectively evaluate your position so that you know when to take a draw, when to offer a draw, and stuff like that. But I guess if you're just one of the best in the world, maybe you can get around that just by playing better moves, to paraphrase Fischer.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to compare, for example, players who grew up, let's say, pre-engine area, like Kramnik, for example. When he grew up as a chess player, they didn't have still very strong engines. And to compare him, for example, with a player of modern era like Caruana or Wesley So and Karyakin and so on, and to see, to compare let's say, what's the word for that? Like how optimistic they are about their evaluations, because maybe for players who grew up with engines, they are less confident about their evaluations because they always know that the engine might find a better move. But maybe for a player like Kramnik, who he's kind of, maybe in his head, he's kind of used to being right and being the strongest player, so maybe the engines have less impact on his evaluations in his, let's say, in his intuition.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I grew up in the pre-computer age, and I remember that chess players, even ones who are not elite GMs, maybe especially ones who are not elite GMs, they could argue about a position for days.
Right.
Like if you have some position and it's complicated and you don't know what's happening, you could just go down a rabbit hole and be looking at different lines for days, and people might have different opinions. Whereas now it's kind of a lost art, because if you want to know the answer, similar to Wikipedia looking up an answer to a trivia question or something like that, if you want to know the answer in chess, you can just plug it in and you'll find out in a few minutes at the most.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Many times, for example, after I finished a game, for example, a very high-profile game in some chess league or chess tournament, many times right after the game, some amateur players came to me and said, "Oh, Asaf, do you know you had some winning move there and you had some winning move there?" And it's very funny because I'm the one who kind of supposed to be the one who explaining things to them, but they see everything, with the engine online or something, and they're just very confidently saying, "Yeah, you went wrong there and you went wrong there." It's kind of a funny situation.
Yeah, it is funny. I don't know if you happen to come across this, but Sagar Shah from ChessBase India has been interviewing Vishy Anand's wife, and it's really interesting interview. You guys should check it out. All listeners should take a look at it online if you haven't yet. But she talks a lot about, she's his manager, so she talks about organizing his schedule and planning his trips, but also sort of just helping be the emotional support that an elite player needs. And in it, she quotes her husband saying, when he plays a game, after he's done with a game, he wants to hear anything from me except for what the engine said. He doesn't want to hear me say, like, why didn't you play this move because of the engine? Because it's a little unfair that she's just relaxing on the couch, seeing what the best move is, and he's there in the trenches.
Yeah, I know exactly what he means. I've seen also, for example, as a growing chess player, many times we would go to some chess tournament around the world, and we were all together, like in the hotel or whatever. And many times, for example, the parents of these players, not specifically mine, by the way, mine never did it, but I always seen some conversation about parents being very mad about their children, and the parents don't even necessarily know chess or maybe know a little of chess. And
right.
They say, "Oh, come on, how could you miss that move?
Right.
How could you do
exactly.
this? I'm paying for all of your chess tournaments, and you cannot even see this move." Like it was kind of, it's very funny to see, and kind of sad at the same time. Yes.
Yeah, well said. I think any chess educator can relate to that experience. So Asaf, for our listeners who aren't familiar with you, so you're a 23-year-old Israeli, almost 2,500 ELO. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into chess and all that stuff?
Yes, of course. So basically, I started playing chess when I was, I think, about 6 or 7 years old. I was at first grade. Also, my parents, I was born in Israel, but my parents are originated from a Soviet Union. So when they heard that I'm kind of interested in chess, which, by the way, a common mistake that people kind of think that that my parents, let's say, brought me to play chess, which is not true. I kind of went to some chess after school activity, and I kind of got into it. And when they heard that I'm interested, they were like, "Oh, great! I mean, if you're interested in chess, we are very happy to support it." And ever since, they kind of have been very much supportive of me. And I've won a couple of Israeli national championships in the youth category, under 14, after 16, under 20, and they also represented Israel in a couple of world and European championships. And I think probably the peak of my career is the fact that I've won the Open championship of the Israeli championship, like for adults, and also probably winning. I won some tournaments, but obviously this is the tournament which kind of sounds, for example, for a non-chess player, when I say that I've won the Israeli championship, it sounds much better than saying, I've won a grandmaster round-robin tournament, right? They have no idea what I'm talking about. So
yeah, of course. Yeah, even if you said you won like Aeroflot or something like that, then people outside of chess wouldn't know how impressive that is. But obviously saying that you won the Israeli Open. So did that mean that you were national champion at that point?
Yeah, well, in Israel we have the Open Championship of Israel and the Close Championship, which is slightly more, let's say, the stronger tournament is the Close tournament, because you only get there by being above a certain rating or by winning some tournaments. But in that year there was no closed championship, so officially I was kind of Israeli champion. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I was looking online. I was researching chess in Israel a little bit, and it seemed like some years there was no Israeli closed, and other years there were. So that was one of the things I wanted to clarify with you.
Yeah, so it's being held every 2 years. But, as every chess federation, sometimes there are probably issues with, some money-raising issues or this kind of thing. So I guess in some years this championship didn't happen from some finance reasons or political reasons. I'm not even sure myself.
Okay. Yeah, and I was checking out the top 25 players in FIDE rating from Israel, and I was pretty surprised. I mean, I saw your rating first, but then to see that you're 25th. Obviously, Israel has a rich chess history, but still, that is super strong for the population that Israel has, how many strong players are in the country. So are there a lot of opportunities to compete in a strong chess community there? Well,
I wouldn't say. I mean, there is definitely a lot of chess players and a lot of interest in chess. I wouldn't say Israel is like particularly, let's say, good place to compete, because there aren't too many, let's say, open tournaments in Israel. Actually, almost zero. We have some round robin grandmaster, international master tournaments, and all kinds of different open tournaments. But we don't have, for example, almost never we have the kind of tournaments they have, for example, in Europe or in the United States, like big opens, like you mentioned, Aeroflot or this kind of tournaments in the US, almost never. But what we do have in Israel is a very big percentage of the population originated from Soviet Union, like couple, maybe 2 million people by this point, out of 7 million people, I think, in Israel total. So I think this really gave chess a very big kind of, let's say, a very big place of interest in the Israeli culture. That's my belief.
That makes sense. And do you feel like it's going to trickle down to the next generation? You mentioned that you found chess through an after-school program. Do you feel like there's like kids, the younger generation is maintaining the interest that's been brought from the Soviet Union?
Yes. So I actually think that now more than ever, chess is gaining popularity in the, let's say, in the lower levels of this game. So I think as years progress, is actually becoming more let's say, difficult or tricky to live as a chess professional. So let's say purely from a professional or elitist point of view, I think chess is might be in some kind of let's say downhill if we compare it, for example, to the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, where chess was like in the golden era, right? But if we look at just purely in the popularity of the game, let's say in the wide range of people in all classes, and I think chess is having a huge popularity these days. Once again, I can say this about Israel. I see that in many schools, in many after-school programs, there are a lot of chess-related activities, and I think it's great, actually.
Yeah, that's certainly the case in the United States, as regular listeners to this podcast have heard us talk about a lot. But I'm glad to hear that that's the case in Israel as well. And as for your playing, so you mentioned you're a chess professional, mainly a chess trainer. As for your playing, am I correct that you have one GM norm to go to reach Grandmaster status?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. And do you get a chance to travel much to play, or are you pretty much focused on teaching and staying at home right now?
I've definitely am playing less tournaments than I was, for example, 2-3 years ago when I was actually in the Israeli army. In Israel, the army is kind of mandatory, so but I had a status of like an active sportsman, they call it, and the army kind of gives this kind of sportsman the option of playing tournaments and training. And during this time, I had more chance of traveling around. But since I was kind of released off duty, so I had a lot of kind of being very busy at work with students and with lectures and all kinds of chess-related activities. Okay, and also, of course, you know how it is. I have a girlfriend for a couple of years, and she doesn't like too much the idea of me disappearing for like 2 weeks or something.
Yeah.
So basically it's slightly more tricky to play tournaments right now, but I still do play like 2-3 tournaments a year, including the Israeli league. So yeah, I'm still an active chess player, definitely.
Okay, and are you feeling like you really need to get the GM title, or just like if it happens, it happens?
Yeah, so I really don't feel under pressure to achieve it because I feel like the pressure is kind of is doing, let's say, negative influence on me personally. Maybe for some people, the pressure to achieve some goals gives them some kind of a drive to achieve them. But for me, it's kind of working the other way around, and I actually feel like ever since I kind of I'm less stressed about achieving this title. I'm even playing better in a way. So if it happens, it happens. If not, it's also okay. So I'm kind of going with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a good perspective to have. It can stress you out, I'm sure, if you just obsess about it, and it probably. Obviously, you're so close, so that part has to be a little bit enticing, but it probably doesn't impact your daily life very much, whether you're a grandmaster or international master.
Yeah, this is true. It's mainly about at this point for me. Of course, I really, really do want to achieve the grandmaster norm, but it's really more about this feeling of completion. Can you say this?
Complacency, yeah.
Complacency. Sorry.
I was just going to say your English is great. That's a good word for a non-native English speaker.
Well, thank you. So it's a good feeling, and it's very satisfying, and but pure. I mean, it doesn't, as you said, it will not like affect my life to a huge degree. Let's say, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess what does affect your life to a huge degree is your teaching. So you're very highly reviewed on Lead Chess. I checked out a couple of your YouTube videos and I really enjoyed them. So do you feel like you have an overall teaching philosophy? How do you help people get better at chess?
Well, first of all, I kind of I felt like let's say when I started teaching a couple of like years ago, I don't even remember exactly when, but I kind of noticed that it's very difficult to let's say set a very, let's say, fixed training methods for any chess player, because I've seen so many different chess personalities and different chess problems that people have. So basically what I've tried to do as a coach a lot of times is to completely adapt to the student and kind of be able to help him in what he needs, in also explain things to him in the way that he understands. Because, for example, when I was younger and I was being taught chess by actually various trainers, most of them, by the way, were obviously ex-Soviet Union players or teachers. Sometimes they were using, for example, chess terms or chess words which were very difficult for me to understand exactly what they tried to say. So my approach was always to try to speak in a very understandable language, let's say, for the average person who is not necessarily, having a huge, let's say, knowledge about chess and so on. And this is really, let's say, the core of my approach for coaching.
Okay. So you look at games and basically evaluate what you think is best for them, or do you just have them tell you what they need to work on?
Well, a little of both, but mainly I would say that let's say I evaluate higher, let's say, my opinion over theirs.
As you should.
Yes, because not always people know what's best for them. And this is why it's very important for me, as you said, to go through the games and we do it together during our lessons. So we say, oh, you see here, we have let's say, a very frequent type of mistake that you do, or a very frequent, blunders that you make. So we kind of try to make conclusions about which areas of the game are more urgent or important to improve at this point, and we kind of adjust accordingly.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and sounds like a good approach, and I know that it's resonated with people. So I think part of the way that you have found students is through YouTube. So how did you get started streaming on YouTube?
So actually, a couple of years ago, my friend from Israel, Grandmaster Tal Baron, he started his own kind of chess YouTube channel, and when he started doing this, I've seen that people are kind of reacting very well and giving him a lot of kind of good comments about kind of the how good it is for them, is that they have a grandmaster who talks about the game and so on. And it kind of, and I actually myself, I'm a bit of I would say a little shy person. So for me to, at first, the idea of making my own YouTube channel sounded a bit like a difficult task, kind of speaking to an audience and so on. But one of the good things in YouTube, as I see it, is that you record your own videos, and you can choose which one to upload and which one to not upload, and you have kind of a freedom of you can say what you want and express your feelings. And I kind of got into it. I tried it for once or twice, and I saw it was very fun for me doing, because I very much like teaching and explaining. And at some point it just escalated. So now my channel is slightly bigger than it was initially.
Yeah, well, if you do a good job, you'll find an audience sooner or later. So yeah. I know that you speak a few languages, Asaf. Have you done any streaming in Israeli? And you speak Russian too, right?
Right. So I really tried initially to do some videos also in Hebrew.
Right. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I also speak Russian, by the way. Yeah, and but the only problem really with Hebrew is the low amount of audience and people who speak this language throughout the world. Like at best maybe 15 million people. Like of course it's incomparable with English or even Russian. So at some point I just understood that in order to have some bigger audience and to be able to speak to more people, I'll have to do it in English probably. And also it kind of helped me to improve my English a bit. So I think if to watch maybe some of my earlier videos, maybe my English was worse and maybe now it's better. So I'm kind of seeing it as a good experience for me.
That makes sense. And I know you have a lot of students from all over the world. So are most of your lessons done in English?
Yes, maybe 90%. Okay, occasionally I'll have an English a lesson in Russian, and most of my Hebrew speaking students are kind of obviously resident in Israel, and Israel is a kind of a small country. So if you want to have a coach, usually you would just meet with him. It's kind of rare to have lesson sessions on Skype, but I do some of these also. But yeah, the majority are in English.
Okay, and do you do any like lectures or regular classes out in the world in Israel, or is it just mostly online stuff other than the occasional one-on-one lesson in person?
Yeah, I definitely do lectures, and this sometimes I'll do simultaneous exhibition games in Israel. As I said, chess is gaining a lot of popularity, and actually, every time I'm surprised. So when you take a lot of people who are not related to chess, and you put you let them watch a chess simultaneous exhibition, I'm always surprised by how amazed they are by, wow, how can he play so many people at the same time? It's so amazing. How can he remember all of the positions? And for a chess player to make a simultaneous exhibition, if the opponents are not so strong, right? It's actually quite easy, right? I mean, you just play the first move which pops to mind, and usually it's enough to beat 95% of the players, right? It's not such a big deal for us, but for the crowd, it's amazing. So as a promotional tool, I've always, in order to make people interested in chess, I've always thought that simultaneous exhibition is a great idea, actually.
Yeah, it seems like it impresses people just as much as blindfold, when to me, I can play, I'm 2170 FIDE, I can play one, maybe two games blindfold, and I'm pretty weak when I do it. So someone like Timur Gureyev, who can play a million games, and we had GM Elshan Moriarty-Badi, who said he plays 10 blindfold games. To me, that's staggering. But the actual Simo, I'm just like, whatever. Anyone can do that, basically. Right? I mean, within reason. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I know that we have a lot of chess educators and promoters who listen. So just to give a quick free bit of advice, I have a friend in Pittsburgh, Gabe Pettish, who about 2,400 USCF. And he actually drummed up business just by going to local libraries and offering to do simuls. So he just offers to do simuls, puts up the flyers, signs up people, and a bunch of kids who maybe like know how to play chess but aren't that interested sign up. And then even though he doesn't make any money, he does this for free. Suddenly you've got a whole influx of new potential students who might contact him about lessons or might be interested in taking classes as a follow-up. So yeah, simuls definitely, they attract new people to chess, so they're a good thing to incorporate.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have a question from a supporter of the podcast. People who donate to the podcast through Patreon or PayPal, as regular listeners know, find out the guests in advance and can submit questions. So Sanat Singhai asks you, what's some bad chess advice that you hear thrown around a lot, and who trained or influenced you?
Sorry. So just to be sure I understand the question. So the first one is what?
Yes. Bad. So we'll take them one at a time. Yeah. What is some bad chess advice that you hear thrown around a lot?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's one of those on-the-spot questions. I probably should have given you a heads up, but I'm sure that if you think about it, you can come up with something. Do you want to hear the other question first?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is who trained you or influenced you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, so I had a couple of chess coaches throughout the years, and actually I think there is something good, very positive about having a couple of coaches over the years, because it kind of gives you a different perspective of many different chess players, their vision of the game, their approach. And actually I feel like the fact that I didn't have like one particular coach, but many of them kind of helped me to understand the game better. But to name some of the more influential ones on, let's say, I would say on my game are Grandmasters Konstantin Lerner, which actually passed away a couple of years ago, and Grandmaster Alon Greenfield from Israel. These two, like I feel purely, if we speak about the influence on my game as I see it today, I kind of see a reflection of them, let's say.
So what did they teach you? Like what were they positional players, tactical players? Was it about approach? What lessons did you learn from them? Well,
a little bit of everything. So just seeing, for example, they're both of them very much different in their approach. Lerner was from Ukraine. He was a very classical, let's say, classic coach for the Soviet Union time. He was one of the seconds of Anatoly Karpov during his match with Kasparov. So he had a huge knowledge of chess openings and chess theory. So he helped me a lot in this area of the game and understanding some classical ideas of chess. And with Alon Greenfield, this was more about understanding chess dynamics, feeling the right moment to strike, just knowing the true value of pieces, these kind of things, which I feel like today I feel like I have a relatively good understanding on, is kind of influenced mainly by him. So this is really the reasons these two names came up to my head.
Okay, and what about historical figures? Do you have a favorite chess player of all time or someone whose games you enjoyed the most?
Yes, actually I have a very good answer for this. I would say that the most influential player, and at the same time my favorite player on my style is definitely Garry Kasparov.
Nice.
I really like his games, his dynamic style. I think he brought chess one step forward. Kind of his opening preparation, his ideas, some positional sacrifices which he showed and he played, and people were pretty much overwhelmed by him. I think this is one of the reasons why he was, maybe if we take all world champions, he was maybe one of the most, let's say, kind of the ones who had a very big gap between him and the second one after him, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we see a similar thing today with Carlsen, but maybe he was one of the first ones who was like, who had a very big gap after the runner-up after him.
Yeah.
So.
And Karpov's games, his probably second in command through most of Kasparov's peak. Karpov's games are fun in their own right in a different way. But yeah, Kasparov, I just felt like his games were more vibrant. They just so much dynamism in all of the games. So I'm with you. I'm a big fan of his chess as well. So speaking of Magnus, before we get back to the other half of this question, so again, I'm going to be talking with my guests about the upcoming World Championship once the candidates is over, but I do feel like we have a decent, with 5 rounds to go, I would say, Fabiano is probably about 55% to win, and Mamedyarov is probably 25%, just off the top of my head, and everyone else is below that. So do you think Fabiano or Mamedyarov would have a decent chance of dethroning Magnus?
Well, I'll tell you what, Ben. I think that from pure chess point of view, there is still, I think, no doubt that Carlsen is kind of the dominant player in every match, like against every player that he will play against. But I think that's because Magnus has achieved already so much in his life, being the world champion for a couple of times in a row and being the first on the rating. So we in the last couple of years, we're seeing a bit of a drop in his maybe motivation, perhaps. So I think that there is some chance for a player, for example, like Caruana, who is very well prepared in the opening, and so I do think there is a chance that we will have an interesting match with let's say with the underdog player winning, definitely.
Yeah, that would be good, and I have to admit I kind of discounted Caruana leading up to this just because he hadn't been in peak form. But if he does win, I'll be super excited. I really wanted him to face Magnus in the last championship when Karyakin narrowly beat him. So it would be kind of an unfinished business aspect to Caruana playing him, and it would be great for chess to have two young, well-spoken, great representatives of chess facing off in London.
Yes, I also think it's kind of, Caruana versus Carlsen is maybe in a way it's kind of a battle of kind of the same generation but completely different approaches of chess, because Carlsen is the more kind of intuitive player, playing with his feeling many times, not being so much prepared in the opening but outplaying his opponent in the second part of the game. Caruana being the more calculated one, the more opening orientated player, and it would be very interesting to see this clash of let's say chess approaches in this kind of match.
Yeah, it would be great. So, and Mamedyarov would be interesting too. Kind of a different matchup. But anyway, we'll know soon enough. One more week and this question will be resolved. So,
yes.
So another thing I like to do with all of my guests, Asaf, is get book or chess improvement recommendations. So we talked a little about what you do with your students, but what about generally if someone's self-motivated or maybe can't afford to get lessons from someone, how should they spend their time? Let's say you have 5 hours a week to get better at chess. First of all, if there's any books that stand out to you that players should read, or just generally how you think people should approach chess improvement.
Yeah, great. So actually I did prepare an answer for this because I knew this a very frequent question in those podcasts. So of course, book recommendations are very much it's related to the let's say the level, the starting point of the player. Obviously, if a player wants to improve from being a complete beginner to a 2000 rating, it's a bit different from improving, for example, from 2200 to 2500, right?
Right.
So I would say that for complete beginners or people who maybe not complete beginners but know something about chess but feel like they don't understand chess, let's say in terms of strategy or general, let's say, principles, I think a very good starting point. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, probably it's a very maybe a bit of a generic choice by me, but I really evaluate the book My System of Nimzowitsch very highly in this sense.
It's a little bit controversial here. I would say probably when it comes up, 3 out of 4 guests speak highly of it, but a few have just said it's outdated and boring.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think if you take this book purely from scientific point of view, it might have obviously some mistakes. But if a player just wants to, let's say, to learn very basic stuff about chess terms like, I don't know, a blockade, an outpost, what is how to fight against isolated pawn and so on, all of these basic things, I think it's a good starting point. I wouldn't be maybe recommending this book for already a very far advanced player, but let's say as a starting point, I really believe kind of in this book.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it's such a classic that you should read it and form your own opinion. Like if you pick it up and it's boring you, it's okay to put it down, but at least check it out on your own and don't take someone else's word for it.
Yes.
Okay, what else?
Yeah, so let's say for the more advanced players, let's say people who are, let's say, it's always difficult for me to understand the rating differences, for example, in the US ratings and the Israeli ratings, because as I understood, they're a bit different from each other.
Mildly, 50 to 100 points. Like USEF is inflated by 50 to 100 points compared to ELO, compared to FIDE. So. Oh
yeah, okay. So for example, for players who are about maybe 1700, 1600, maybe 1800 in this kind of range of ratings, I can say that for me personally, I felt like a very good book that helped me understand better chess strategy and ideas like positional sacrifices or dynamics, these kind of things which are less, I think, very difficult for a beginner to grasp because they are kind of less abstract maybe than other things. So I would recommend this book. Okay, I've read it in Hebrew originally, but I believe the name of it in English is what's the name? Like Positional Chess Handbook, perhaps. I think it's by Israel Gelfer. Are you familiar with this one?
I am not, no, but it's good to get new suggestions. So I'll try to track it down. Positional Chess Handbook. Okay.
I think that's the name. Maybe some slightly different order.
Okay.
But the author is Israeli, so I think maybe this is the reason why this book is maybe perhaps is maybe more well known in Israel than it is in some maybe other countries. But it's been obviously translated to English and some other languages, and I can say that once again it's a good book to understand those more advanced strategic ideas.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I just fact-checked you, and you do have the name right in English. It's Positional Chess Handbook. So, yeah, Great. I'll be sure to put a link to that, and I'd like to check it out myself. Sounds good. And what about, like, your philosophy on doing tactics and stuff like that versus studying endgames? I mean, obviously, you have to be good at everything to beat 2,500, but how do you think people should budget their time?
Right. So, that's a good question. So, first of all, I think for a complete beginner or just slightly beginner players, I wouldn't spend so much time on studying endgames. Maybe very, very basic endgames, of course. Winning with a queen versus king, so on. Right. But starting to look at some books about slightly more complicated endgames. Might not be very practical because, I mean, first of all, I feel it's more important to get rid of the big blunders, the very big mistakes, and so you don't get to see so many end games as a beginner, I think. But some people would argue with me about this because I know the very acceptable approach for many Soviet Union chess coaches is like, oh no, you should study endgames from day one, and I'm not saying they are wrong. That's just my opinion, but that's just a matter of approach, I guess. And about tactics, well, obviously tactics are sacred, right? I mean, to be a great player, you must know how, like, spotting the right moment for a tactic, right?
Right.
So the only one thing that I don't like so much about let's say the most well-known places to study tactics, like sites like, I don't know, maybe Chess Tempo or some just just other chess, even some chess tactic books, that most of them just give you, let's say, a certain position and say, okay, why to play and win, right?
Right.
But in order to feel the right moment for a tactic in an actual game, it's a bit different, right?
It's a huge difference, yeah.
It's a huge difference, and
that actually happened to Fabiano yesterday, trying to push through a win against Dingliren. Sorry, he missed a win in like a tactic that was basically white to move and win in 3, and it was kind of It was kind of a counterintuitive move. You had to sack a piece, but if it were presented to him as a tactics puzzle, he would solve it in a second. But when it's one moment in a game, it's a lot harder to spot.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I to this day I still didn't came across, for example, a good book which kind of deals with this topic well, like how to exactly spot the right moment for a tactic or for some direct attack or whatever. But I don't want to kind of leave the audience without anything. So I would kind of give a small advice on this. So let's say when you play games, whether it's like online or over the board chess. So if you feel like you have a bit of struggle to spot tactics, I think it's a very good idea during the game to try, let's say more often than not, just defining for yourself, is this position tactical? Should I search for tactics? Where does my opponent has some hanging pieces? And even if those things are maybe a lot of times very theoretical, for example, the opponent makes a move, and you see that in some variation you might have a possibility for a fork, for example, which might not work right away, but maybe in some later part in the game it will work. So it's important to grasp the tactical ideas in mind, kind of have a little, maybe we could call it like a small database of potential tactical ideas in the position, and then it might be easier to execute them in the right moment because they know they exist.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, just take a little inventory and then keep it in mind and try not to forget.
Yeah, kind of give yourself candidate tactical ideas, and then when the right time comes, you're kind of more likely to spot them if you already have the idea or the motif in mind.
That makes sense. Okay, and Asaf, I just have a couple more questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So people always like to hear stories. Listeners like to hear stories. So I don't know if you have any famous stories from your travels, or like the strongest chess player you ever played or came across, or if anything comes to mind with regard to your experiences as an up-and-coming strong young chess player.
Yeah, I actually do have some little story which relates to both playing against a very strong player and, being kind of overwhelmed by this. So in the year 2000, and I believe it was 13, so I played in the Isle of Man tournament, which, by the way, in the recent years has become a very strong open tournament, right? So in the last couple of editions, we've seen players like, almost all of the elite players playing there, right?
Yeah.
But when I played there, it was already a strong tournament, but not, let's say, as strong as it was in the last couple of years. And in one of the rounds, I've seen the pairings for the next day, and just searching my name. And suddenly, I saw that I was being paired against a Grandmaster Michael Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, okay, so for those who don't know, maybe Michael Adams, I think at this moment of recording is maybe not already in the top 10 players in the world. But I think at his peak, he was somewhere around number 3, maybe even number 2. I'm not sure in the world. Very, very strong player. But not only a very strong player, is a player who is extremely well known for his kind of coolness and very kind of ability to be extremely calm in every kind of situation. And when I played against him, I was really not only amazed by this. So after the game, I obviously lost. It was an interesting game, but I lost eventually. And after the game, in the post-mortem analysis, so first of all, after the game, he was like a very big hero for me, a very well-known player. I was very happy to analyze the game with him a bit, and I kind of humbly said, sorry, Michael, do you want maybe to analyze the game a bit? I was kind of expecting him to say, no, come on, I have some dinner or something. But no, he actually accepted, and we went to the analyze room. And actually, I kind of had the imagine in my head that probably I didn't see a lot of variations that he did see in the game, and that's why I lost. Right? It's kind of, that's what you think when you play against such a strong player. But actually, I was kind of amazed to see how, let's say, his intuition. Many times I would ask him in the post-mortem analysis, like, for example, yeah, I was considering playing this, and then I would show him some variation that I calculated, and he was like, no, I didn't even consider this move. I don't think it's good, something like that. And I was like, come on, that's a serious move. No, I mean, that's a sensible move. And it's not like he was trying to be kind of cocky or anything. His intuition, he counts on his intuition so strongly, and his intuition is amazing that many times he's not even calculating so deeply many variations. He kind of knows exactly which kind of moves are important and which moves are not important. And I guess this was very remarkable for me. Somebody who is calculating a lot and him just very calmly, not calculating too much and still managing to find the best moves. And after checking the game afterwards, even with the engine, many times his moves were right, even though he didn't calculate them maybe even properly, but they were still right because he felt they were like the best moves. And this was quite an amazing experience for me, definitely.
Wow, that's an awesome story. I mean, there's so much to unpack from that. I mean, first of all, Mickey Adams, you're not the first guest who has come on and said, basically lavished him with praise, both for his decorum, the way he handles himself, and I think he in particular is known for having an intuitive chess style. And it's also interesting what you said about asking him to analyze, because we've had different, people suggest different things about if you're playing a stronger player, like, should you ask them to analyze, or do you need do they need to offer? Like, do you have I guess we know your opinion on that, but were you nervous in asking him that?
Well, I wouldn't say nervous, but I was, once again, I mentioned earlier, a bit of a shy person, and I kind of felt like the little man, asking the big man for some advice or something. But I wouldn't say I felt nervous, but I actually don't see a reason why it would be impolite or not. Like, what's the problem with offering your opponent to analyze? I mean, if a weaker opponent would ask me to analyze, I don't personally. I wouldn't mind analyzing and helping him. Maybe just because that's just an opinion, of course. But maybe that's just because in my nature, maybe I like to explain things and help people improve or something. So I kind of feel the experience of analyzing with a weaker opponent kind of fun for me also. But yeah, I didn't even know that some people have issues with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And certainly if you're the stronger player and someone asks you to analyze, it's okay to say no without being offended. Like, it's good that generally we want people to want to improve at chess and to continue to have strong interest in the game. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's bad to ask, but I have heard some people say that. So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, so just two more, Asaf.
Yeah.
Number one, what do you like? You mentioned you've had a girlfriend for a couple years. What else do you do? What are you interested in besides chess? What do you do for fun?
Yeah. So, well, one of my biggest actually interests and love, let's say, is actually music. I am myself as a hobby. I play drums. I try to play some other instruments as well, but not not as successfully. I would say that if I need to compare my, let's say, drumming abilities to a chess rating, I would say that maybe I'm I don't know, like 1700, 1800 at drumming.
Okay, not bad.
Not bad. Like I you know I could fill up for some AC/DC
nice
show. I don't know. No, just because it's so easy, kind of. But
right.
I love music quite a lot. Almost every genre of music that you throw at me. I mean, let's say more musical musics. I mean, I don't like so much like electronic or I don't like so much modern pop music. I would listen to rock music, even heavy metal music or classical music. Whichever music that make me feel like the musician made a good effort of making good music, very sophisticated music, let's say, or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's one big interest that I have. Okay, I like sports very much. I even have tickets actually for the World Cup in Russia, actually. In Moscow.
Wow, awesome!
Who
are you going to be rooting for?
Oh, that's like the half final game, so I still don't know who is playing.
But like overall, who do you want to win?
Overall, yeah, that's a difficult question. I never had, I don't know why exactly, but I never was a very much big fan of any team or any of any particular kind of state. I just come to see good matches and just let it be any team who wins. It's fine with me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And last thing, I just wanted to circle back to see if you've thought of any bad chess advice yet.
Yeah. So throughout this interview, I'm kind of trying to run in my head because it's a good question. Because let's say that I'm not sure that if this is the answer people are looking for, but this is something very much, let's say, from the heart. So I would see many times players making mistakes in some positions just because, and let's say I would ask people or students, okay, why would you make this move? It's obviously bad or it's obviously not good. And he would say even things like, I know, I felt it's not good or I knew it's bad, but I've heard some grandmaster saying that in such position you should play this. So basically, many players have this tendency to be very, let's say, close-minded or narrow-minded. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. To be very much fixed on a certain idea that, for example, double pawns are always bad, for example, or that isolated pawns are always bad or always good. And I would say that a bad advice would be to let people think that a certain principle or a certain rule or a certain idea is always true, or you can always implement it. So I would maybe the best suggestion I can give on this, that even if you read some idea or some some motifs, some opening move, you should always kind of think on your own and try to understand whether it's really is the case in that specific position. Because chess, at the end of the day, is a very specific game. I think you would agree with me. It's there like countless amount of positions, and you cannot be fixed on certain ideas in your mind. You have to be kind of very open-minded on your decisions.
Yeah, for sure. We've explored this topic on the podcast from both angles, because I am John Watson. He kind of had his writing has that overarching theme that at the top levels you have to unlearn all of the sort of heuristics and shortcuts you've learned at the lower levels. But at the same time, we're wired to want to know rules of thumb. Chess, because it's such a rich and complicated game, it's like it feels to someone fairly new to the game, it can be overwhelming. So you really want to have you want to have shortcuts in mind and sayings in mind. So it can be very tricky to find the right balance. That's true. This is why I say that, all of those principles or guidelines, I mean, maybe if you take it statistically, are probably right maybe 80% of the time, maybe 90, I'm not sure. But there is always the exceptions. And this is why keeping open mind is extremely important, I believe. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so Asaf, I think that's all for questions. Are you on social media at all? What is the best way for people to reach out to you if they would like to do so?
Well, I actually improved on this aspect than I previously was. I used to be kind of on Facebook and this kind of things, but now I do have obviously email, Instagram, Facebook, and obviously the YouTube channel itself kind of presents the option of contacting me. And also many people contact me through chess sites such as Lichess or chess.com. I just have a profile there, so you can also send me a message on these sites if it's comfortable for them. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so not hard to track down, and I'll link to your YouTube page in the show description. And yeah, I think our listeners will have enjoyed this, and hopefully if anyone's interested in coaching, they can give you a shout, or at minimum check out your YouTube channel. Before I end this interview, this is Asaf. I apologize. Yeah. Just to let the audience know that I forgot to mention it at the beginning, that I'm hoping to be back on schedule with the podcast on Tuesday, but there's still a lot going on with my move. So I apologize in advance. There might be some disruptions for one more week, but I have plenty of guests to schedule. So I would say within 2 weeks, it's going to be business as usual, and I'll do my best to get something out on Tuesday of next week. So anyway, I just wanted to say that before because I forgot to mention it. But Asaf, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was really good.
Thank you too, Ben. It was a great experience, and I really wanted to thank you for what you're doing. I actually think that this kind of talks with all kinds of chess players and personalities is really a very kind of it's a great way, I think, for people to kind of reach out for those very interesting figures in the chess world. So really, thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, hopefully, everyone feels like they know each other a little bit more. Like, even from watching your YouTube videos, they see that you're enthusiastic about chess, and obviously you know your stuff. But now, I mean, people know a bit more about your personality. So that's the goal, and I hope it's happening to some extent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you too, Ben. Have a nice and easy moving to your new place.
Oh man, hopefully it gets easier because this has been brutal.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Thanks to everyone who supports Perpetual Chess. I spend about 5 hours a week on each episode, and even though I love doing the show, it can be hard to find the time. Without the financial support of the chess community, Perpetual Chess would not be possible. Special shout out goes to my Patreon and PayPal Perpetual partners, and I have finally updated the list. You guys are Adam Vrancoulge, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, Chad Hilton, Chris Flanagan, Chris Lott, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Wood, Coach Jay's Chess Academy, Gary Andrews, Greg Shahadi, James Bonastasia, Jason Dunbar, Jeffrey Martello, Jen Shahadi, Jennifer Valens, Jen Scream, John Fernandez, Johnny McMenamin, Kelly Palmer, Krishna Gopalakrishnan, Lorraine Dore, Macaulay Peterson, Matthew Tedesco, Pascal Charbonneau, Paul Sweeney, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Ricky Grijalva, Rob Lazorchek, Tatya Abrahamian, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Todd Bryant, Tony Rotella, Victor Vrankulj, Zhao Cheng, Zhivko Storyanov. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll catch you guys next week with another episode.